There is no debate. He is the greatest coach.
You think he goes
time.
above?
It felt really sort of doomsday
Acceptance.
scenario, like this is kind of our season gone.
But if they are able to speak and kind of pitch this thing to him, you just wait another year.
Welcome back to Monday Vibes, one and all. We are back in the building. Look who's joined me today. Of course, it's Doogie Critchley and it is Zachary Jalab here to analyse some of the biggest moments of the weekend. And there were some big talking points. But first and foremost, boys, how was your weekend?
Very good, very good. Got up to bits and bobs and watched Chelsea lose. So yeah, an average weekend to be fair. And now we've got podcast arms, so we are really living that life at the moment.
Stepping up. Yeah, mine was good. I had a 30th. I had a mate celebration because he's passed an exam. Can't complain. Lovely weekend. How was yours, Joe?
Yeah, good. I want to know what the people at home make of these podcast arms. I can't work them out. I've been told they look better though, so let us know what you think in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the football at the weekend as well. We'll start as we do every week with some moments of the weekend. Tap in for me, Big Sam. Big Sam Allardyce. We will talk about Leeds in a bit because we are going to do relegation. But Big Sam finding a £5 note on the floor and putting it in the pocket of the fourth official. Has there ever been a Big Sam moment like that? That's just... everything about that I love.
Yeah, it was the sort of thing that him or like Louis van Gaal would do as well. It's like that sort of humour, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was like the little wink, like the nudge, like the fourth official was like, God, here
and
we
his
go
assistant,
again.
Carl Robinson, absolutely loved it as well. He thought it was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
It was good.
We're going to talk a lot about the relegation battle coming up in this show, though, so let's move on from that. Jalab?
Yeah, I want to raise something a little bit different, actually. I thought Jeff Stelling was really good on the weekend. On his penultimate Soccer Saturday, he spent a little bit of time talking about eating disorders. Take a look at this clip.
It's my second last show, so I'm going to have my final sort of rant, if you like, and I've got to be careful to get it right. There was a march this morning. This relates to Abby Davis, actually. There was a march this morning in central London by the people who run a Dump the Scales campaign. It's led by the indefatigable Hope Virgo every year. More people die from eating disorders every year than any other mental illness. The government's lack of awareness and funding is national disgrace. They decided to put calories, for goodness sake, on people's menus. Up to 20% of all eating disorder cases end in death. And the cycle goes like this. As Abby said, boy, girl, woman, man, goes for help. They are told they are not thin enough. They are not underweight enough for any treatment. They go away, they lose more weight, they go further and deeper into the mental morass they're in, they have suicidal tendencies. They are then told you are now too thin to be treated and you are offered palliative care, for God's sake. So we're not going to help you, but we will try and ensure that you die comfortably. It's 2023. Eating disorders are being swept under the carpet. No one should be dying of an eating disorder in 2023. Those with eating disorders need action and help. They need it now.
Yeah, carrying on the theme of feel-good moments, I thought Seb Haller scoring 2 goals in Dortmund's 3-0 win over Augsburg was an amazing moment. This is a guy that missed 23 games earlier in the season with testicular cancer, and he's now put Dortmund on the edge of a first Bundesliga title in 11 years. One of my favourite footballing stories ever, and we will be talking about that in more detail at the end of the show.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be talking a lot about European football, actually, because there's some big issues, isn't there, over the last couple of days across the continent. We're also going to be talking about relegation, like I said, but we're going to start, we have to burn the juice, really, don't we? Manchester City crowned champions for a third time in a row of the Premier League after Arsenal, again, faltered, didn't they, on the weekend, losing to Nottingham Forest. So they were officially crowned after that game, but then the celebrations took place against your beloved Chelsea. And can I just say, that was one of the worst Premier League games I have ever had the misfortune of sitting through. 90 minutes of testimonial Wimbledon-level nonsense. It was awful. Players were picking each other up from the ground, high-fiving opposition midway through the game. I hated every minute of the match.
Could you find a few positives at least, Zach?
Not really. We weren't good, and then we probably, to be fair, we actually should have probably drew. Like, we had chances. Raheem Sterling had a very good chance to put it back, and I think XG had it at like 1.08 to 1.06 in the end.
Yeah.
But look, I think if you're in City's position, it is tough. You've won the league. Like,
9
what
changes
more
as
do you
well.
have to do? And then, yeah, bless him. You saw Calvin Phillips afterwards get asked about it, and I think he was asked about, "Oh, you've started today. How's he feeling?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so happy to have started my first Man City game." But a little bit in the back of his head, he's just like, "Well, it doesn't really matter, even if they'd lost." I think Jack Grealish kind of mentioned it later on when he was asked about his kind of season and winning the Premier League. Does he feel like this one means more to him, even though it was his second Premier League title? And he kind of agreed. He kind of said, "Yeah, this one, I felt like I had more contribution. I started so many more games.
It's true as well.
I felt like Pep was the guy, was someone who trusted me a lot more this season." But we sat here last year, I think, and said that like when you are a new signing at Man City, normally it takes a year for you to bed in and get used to it. And maybe Calvin Phillips will have that same future. Who knows? I mean, with Rodri playing the way he is, it feels maybe a little bit more doubtful now that John Stone playing in midfield as well. But yeah, they got the job done. Like, I think it's very tough. If obviously Arsenal had beaten Nottingham Forest, I'm pretty sure there wouldn't have been 9 changes. I think that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice for Julian Alvarez to get another goal as well. I thought it was a really well-worked goal.
16 this season.
Really
16, he got 4 in the World Cup as well. I think he's been sensational. And it's such a difficult role to play a backup to Erling Haaland because he is the talking point of the Premier League this year. He scored 50 goals or over 50 goals in all competitions. It's very difficult to be that backup. But I think he's made consistent impact coming on games. He's so intense. He can play a variety of positions. I think he's been really, really impressive. And the fact they've already extended his deal, I think, to 2028 now just goes to show how effective he's been.
Do you not think we may eventually get to a situation like Gabby Jesus was at City with him? Because, look, I know there's the possible future that Erling Haaland could go to Real Madrid, so on and so forth, but maybe he doesn't. And Julian Alvarez is too good to be the bench option for the next 5 years. I do wonder whether, like, seeing how in the next 2... But maybe he'll be happy next year to have the same kind of role as this year.
You got to think
but
Mahrez
so
is
good.
32 now.
Yeah,
I think you'd be looking at, could he
Maybe
be
play
pushed
on the
out
wing.
wide slightly more and come inverted? Like, I think there's definitely a space for him in that squad. It just depends what he wants from his career, doesn't it? If he's willing to play slightly more of a rotationary role, because like you say, he's not going to start every minute of every game. Gabby Jesus wasn't willing to do that. The only thing you would say, I feel like he's a better finisher than Gabby Jesus. Like, Gabby Jesus has been sensational this season and obviously has missed games, but he still only scored 10 goals and he was consistently around that sort of number for Manchester City, wasn't he? I think Julian Alvarez in extremely limited minutes to score 16 goals in all competition.
Crazy.
Proves he's one of the best finishers in the league. He's extremely clinical in front of goal, one of the highest conversion rates of any player in Europe this season. So I think he's slightly different to Gabby Jesus in that he offers, I don't know, a different type of player to what Manchester City have in the squad.
He can play deeper as well. Like, if Gundogan does leave this summer, that's no guarantee. And De Bruyne's getting a bit older. Maybe he'll play a little bit less than he did this year, or at least he'll have to be managed more effectively as he goes into that sort of mid-30 range. And you feel with Stone stepping into midfield now, maybe they could play Alvarez as another 8 in midfield, or at least a little bit further forward. So, yeah, you back Pep to find a solution for a player that deserves the minutes. And on the basis of his performances this season, he should play even more next.
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about Man City's dominance as well. Just because, like, that is now 5 titles in 6 years, isn't it? 3 titles in a row. Obviously, Pep Guardiola, he's maybe the greatest manager of all time, isn't he? Or at least in the conversation for the top 3.
100%. I remember I was driving back on Saturday evening from somewhere, listening to TalkSport, and it had a Liverpool fan on, and I think it was O'Hara talking, and he said something about, he was basically something that I agree with, said that Pep Guardiola is maybe the best manager to manage in the Premier League. He said Sir Alex Ferguson, Pep Guardiola, those two are it. And he, the Liverpool fan, it almost felt like he was taking the mick, because he was just like, no, he's not. He's nowhere near. He was like, his thing was, what's Jurgen Klopp won? What's Jurgen Klopp not won in his time at Liverpool? And it was like, okay.
But he's won one of every trophy.
Yeah,
Pep's won like all of it multiple
crazy,
times,
apart
except
from
for the Champions League.
Which could happen this season. It was a crazy argument. I think there's an argument to say that Jurgen Klopp is also one of the best managers to have managed in the Premier League. One of the greatest.
But it's not the level of Pep.
Yeah.
We're talking about a coach who's won, in his 15 professional coaching years, he's won 11 league titles across 3 different countries. He's won a treble. He's on course to win another treble. I think, there's debate being had at the moment online about, is the Premier League becoming a farmers' league? Now, like, I hate the debate, but Man City are becoming, like, totally dominant in this league. Does anybody realistically not see City winning the league again next year?
Well,
I don't.
There has been, I mean, I know they've won 5 of the last 6, but there has been some really tight title races in that. I mean, 18-19 was down to that 1 point as well. Last year was one on the final day. Yeah. This year felt like it was going to go down to the final few weeks. Obviously, Arsenal have massively dropped off and City have just been on this incredible run. What I would say about the Guardiola-Ferguson debate, I think it's actually tighter than people give it credit for. I mean, Ferguson's obviously got that longevity, which massively sways in his way. But I think the standard of managers throughout the Premier League now is so much higher than during Ferguson's time there. When you had the teams between 7th and 12th, you know, a lot of managers there, a lot of sort of English nature, like British managers, not necessarily these. You know, the fact Unai Emery's at Aston Villa, Roberto De Zerbi at Brighton, like these are top
and
managers.
And the teams are tougher now, I think, nowadays. Like, I feel like back in the day, you used to play against teams where you could easily destroy. You look at your derbies that happened, that obviously have
Sunderland a few times as well,
yeah, exactly. Whereas nowadays, like, you come up to the Premier League and it is a tough battle and there's no easy game. I mean, literally look at Man City losing to Brentford this season at home.
But Brentford are like a mid-table team, aren't they? I think there is some dross in this league this season, especially.
Bournemouth.
You
sat here at the beginning of the season criticising Bournemouth and saying they're going straight back down.
I agree, but
and they finished.
Are we saying that Southampton aren't dross?
I think they're better than most 20th sides in recent years.
I think Southampton are better than Derby.
I think they're better than Watford last year, for example, or Fulham's Scott Parker's Fulham side, for example. I don't think they're actually a terrible side. They're just a bit lost.
It's an interesting debate. Like, I think it's one that will be had for a long time about. And it just depends on how long.
If Pep wins the treble, though, there is no debate. He is the greatest coach.
You think he goes above Ferguson?
Man United coach.
To have won 2 trebles in 15 years, across the continent, across 2 different countries, and to have created maybe 2 of the greatest footballing sides ever to play the game in Barcelona, and then if Man City go on to win this treble, you'd have to have Manchester City in the conversation as one of the greatest Premier League sides, if not one of the greatest sides of all time.
To play devil's advocate, is there also though something you can say about how much money he's been allowed to have at his disposal as well?
But loads of clubs have money nowadays. Yeah, like it's not as if he's. Like, if you look at the net spend of Manchester City, and they've sold really well in recent years, which definitely contributes to it. They're not even in the top 3. I don't think. I think they're in the top. I think they're about 4th or 5th in terms of the last 5 seasons.
And also
net spend Manchester City.
It's tough to sit here and say that Alex Ferguson didn't have money to go and buy players either.
But what you would say about Fergie is, like, you look at in the 90s.
Yeah.
The team he took over firstly were much worse than the Man City team that Pep took over. In the 90s, Sir Alex Ferguson spent, I think, across that decade, the 6th most of any Premier League
and he's very close to leaving. He's very close to getting
and he also never finished below 2nd.
No, it was remarkable. The thing with City, you should also have to say, and I feel bad mentioning this because it's not on the fans, it's not on the players, it's not even on Pep. But the charges against them,
it's 115.
It's a massive black mark against their name, and it does kind of cloud it. And you kind of just want it sorted. I know there's a massive investigation, but you can't really fully commit and love this City side, knowing that they've potentially, or at least there's alleged, cheating gone on with how they've structured their deals and how they've financed this side. And it does slightly take away from their achievements. As much as I enjoy their football, I can't fall in love with the project.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, like, Arsenal pushed them really close this season, but they faltered. Like, Liverpool have pushed them close over the last few years. Who do we think pushed them close next season? Is it Arsenal again?
I saw Gary Neville. In fact, you know what? I think a lot of credit has to go to Gary. He's getting a lot of stick midway through the season, and he did speak about that. Obviously, that City run. I feel like we spoke about it as well to pat ourselves on the back. I remember us kind of being on video saying there is that era where City.
I was saying Arsenal would win the league. I said Arsenal would win the league.
I think those moments we definitely believe that Arsenal win the league, but I also remember sitting there thinking there is that period that City do just win games constantly. It goes from March and it's win. And obviously that is what happened, and that's the help of the depth of the side that they've got. So yeah, I was going to say fair play to Neville on that point. And I've slightly forgotten what we were mentioning.
Joe said, who's most likely to challenge next year?
Yeah, I think Liverpool could be interesting. I think the way they if they spend well in the summer and get the positions they need to get in, a year, having now had Nunes, Gakpo's only 6 months, Nunes now a year developed into the Premier League. If they are able to solidify in the summer, sort out their defence, figure out Trent's new position, fantastic.
It's a lot to do, though, isn't it? It's a lot to do. I think Arsenal are in a much better position. I think you look at what Arsenal have been able to do this season, the strides they've taken. We saw the links this morning in David Ornstein's article with Ilkay Gundogan. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that's an extremely punchy move, isn't it? It's going to take another City player. And then two priority targets, Mason Mount and Declan Rice.
Yeah.
I mean, Declan Rice, that feels almost like the worst kept secret in world football, doesn't it, that he's going there? But Mason Mount, Jalab.
Yeah. I mean,
Don't shrug, you'd be gutted, man.
Yeah, of course.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm not saying I wouldn't be, but I just think it'd be a very interesting transfer to see how that works out. One, they'd probably have to overspend what they'd like to spend to try and get him from Chelsea to go to a rival. What that does for like Mason Mount's kind of Chelsea history is interesting too. In terms of like, if you're Mason Mount and you've got Arsenal coming towards you, I completely understand why you want to go there. It looks like the much more appealing project at the moment, especially when they're probably going to be willing to pay you the money that you want as well. I think it is looking for he's looking for £200,000 or so. And so, yeah, I mean, whether he starts week in, week out, if he maybe plays a little bit deeper to get into that side would be really interesting. It's a transfer that would be great. I just wonder, like, the fee that would be needed to get to him, considering he's got 1 year left on his contract. If they can talk, I don't know how they can talk about like tapping up and so on and so forth. But if they are able to speak and kind of pitch this thing to him, you just wait another year. Mason will then be 25, and you can get him for free and to sign him there. Otherwise, you are probably going to have to be spending, I think, 70 million at least to try and get him.
It doesn't feel like
1 year left.
It doesn't feel like a top priority either. Like, I don't think he actually gets into their starting 11 at the moment, given the form of Martin Odegaard this year.
Exactly.
I would probably spend the money on Declan Rice, a backup centre-back, and potentially a new left-back if Kieran Tierney leaves, obviously, and then a Bukayo Saka replacement. Alternative.
But do you not think, like, I don't know if you guys did, but I watched the Forest Arsenal game on the weekend, and they just totally ran out of steam, Arsenal. Like, you can see they've just both mentally and physically gone at this stage. And I do think that a lot of that is down to over-reliance on these young players in key moments. Like, Saka has had nobody to support him. You mentioned a replacement, or not a replacement, alternative for Bukayo Saka there. I think the same could be said of Odegaard. And I think Mason Mount
to the level of Fabio Vieira to be that guy, and it just hasn't quite worked.
But I don't think Mason Mount's going to want to sit on the bench.
But but we're not talking about sitting on the bench, are we? Look at that Man City team. How Pep Guardiola has been able to rotate players like Bernardo Silva, Gundogan,
and we don't know that Mikel can do that.
Foden, Grealish, but that's what he wants to be able to do.
For sure. But I don't think. Like, one of the reasons I think that we've seen Odegaard get to the level he got to this season is that consistency of games. If he is then missing out on one game for Mason Mount and getting dropped to certain points, we might see a drop off of him. We might not. He might continue it. We don't know. Yeah. But I do worry. And the same for Mason Mount. This is a guy. One of Mason's best ever season, or best ever time at Chelsea, was when he was consistently in the side, playing week in, week out. This season, he has been dropped through injuries, through maybe poor performances, so on and so forth, and we've not seen him return to that consistency. Again, he's out injured at the moment. I think if they can get him, brilliant. I just think they might end up overspending to get him when they could maybe wait a year later and sort something else. I mean, next year we could see 3. Like, it wouldn't shock me if, like, for 100% Arsenal will be challenging again next year, and then to see also Liverpool do the same. We might have, you know, a trio we've not had in a little while.
But either way, it's going to be Man City, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Unless, like, there's an Erling Haaland injury. If there was one thing
Alvarez.
they saw,
Alvarez comes in
for sure. But Alvarez, who I think is fantastic, it'll be interesting to see what he's like if he was having to play every single game for a period of 3 months.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the Gundogan injury. But I think there has been a lot of change at City this year. I mean, people forget that not only the 3 big players, Sterling, Jesus and Zinchenko, leaving, but Laporte has now become a bit part player. He was a key man last year.
He was crying yesterday, wasn't he? I kind of felt like that was
a goodbye.
A bit of a goodbye.
He's definitely... Well, I'd be very surprised if he didn't leave.
Yeah, I don't think he played
with good reason. Like, he's a very good player, and he's not getting into that side. And I don't think he's particularly popular. As in, he doesn't love sitting on the bench. Who does? But it feels like he really struggles.
There's some big sales in that City team. You look at some decent fees too. Laporte was to leave. I think that would be a very solid fee. I know Gundogan's going to potentially leave, but that'll be on a free. And then Cancelo, money to be made there as well, isn't there? Like, I think there's money to be made. Plus, given the net spend last year with the big sales of Zinchenko, Gabby Jesus, I think City could dip into the market big. I mean, if they were supposedly interested in Bellingham, and Bellingham we all know was going to be 100 million euros plus, I could see City do some big business in the summer.
Well, there could be chats possibly with Gavi as well at Barcelona. I mean,
don't get started on that.
The biggest surprise.
Should we drop down the league though? Talk about relegation.
We got it.
That's what everybody's there for, isn't it? Really, because I mean, the weekend effectively, for me anyway, I think the weekend killed off Leeds United's Premier League dream.
Yeah.
I think that was a dagger to the heart of Sam Allardyce on the weekend, that result against West Ham, especially with Everton scoring in the 100th minute through Jeremina. I think Leeds are goners.
Yeah, and they've kind of got themselves to blame, I think, in the last couple of weeks as well. They were 1-0 up against Newcastle. Bamford then missed a penalty, drew that 2-2 against the Newcastle side that really weren't at their best that day. Went 1-0 up at the weekend through a really nice Rodrigo volley from a McKennie long throw.
But how good was the finish?
I know, so nice. And then they've also lost Bamford to injury. They've potentially lost Rodrigo to injury as well. And their defence was shocking on Sunday, and just the reaction of Sam Allardyce afterwards being like, look, we're not good enough in both boxes. Luke Ayling was talking about the lack of fitness within the squad. It felt really sort of doomsday scenario, like this is kind of our season gone. And you look at some of the players they brought in, I don't think they've been consistent enough either. I think Nonto started really well, obviously fell out of favour under Javi Gracia. Mark Roca, I expected a lot more of a Bayern Munich player who was unbelievable at Espanyol, one of the most highly rated young La Liga midfielders. Tyler Adams' injury is a massive issue. And then their centre-backs, all their centre-backs they've signed over the last 2 years. I don't know whether it's a system thing, the style of play thing under Bielsa and Marsch, they are often overexposed. But there's just so many individual errors in there.
There really is.
You wouldn't be surprised if Leeds gone down. I think they've been asking for it for a while in the way they've defended.
The one thing I'm going to say, though, is they have got Spurs on the final day. Like I think they're going to go down, but they might even beat Spurs and still go down, honestly. I think Everton at Goodison Park, the atmosphere is going to be absolutely bouncing there for Bournemouth. It's going to be meeting the team off the coach, the blue flares going. Sean Dyche is going to have everybody pumped up to the max.
Bournemouth also, kind of, not necessarily on the beaches, but they're
on a little
They're
bit
full
of the beach,
steps
aren't
for
they?
sure.
They know they're safe. I think Everton are going to get something out of that game, which means Leeds have to win. And do we actually think Tottenham are going to go to Ellen Road and win?
It's difficult at the moment.
When did they last win? Like Tottenham,
it didn't shock me.
It
didn't shock me their performance against Brentford at all. I mean, Brentford. This is the Brentford side who, again, a couple of weeks ago we kind of felt were maybe on the beaches too, and then they lost Ivan Toney, and then Mbeumo decided to become unbelievable over the past 2 games.
The defensive line though from Bournemouth's goals.
Yeah, it's so poor. It's so poor. But you look at Spurs, it really wouldn't shock you. However, I think it's basically who's going to be worse on that day at times, because there hasn't really been much to get from Leeds. The fact that Leeds have lost Rodrigo is so bad.
Yeah.
So bad. Like, they're going to have to rely on Brendan Aronson possibly to try and do something for them on that final day. And the thing is, as bad as Spurs are, and they have been, they've always got Harry Kane, and he is somebody
goal on the weekend,
who,
so nice.
He is somebody who, if he just scores one, if Spurs go 1-0 up like that and heads go down, that could be it for Leeds. It really could.
Felt like some of their defending at the weekend. Ben Davies had a really difficult day. Ollie Skip giving away a ball for a goal as well. And it's 45-minute FC this season. They've been so good in so many halves, but in terms of an entire 90-minute performance, I can barely name one.
It is so crazy considering how bad they've been that Harry Kane has the amount of goals that he has in the Premier League this season.
Remarkable.
I know. Was he on 29?
29, yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like, if this guy, it makes you think, like, if he was playing in that Man City side, like, he probably would have broken the record that was obviously now been set by Erling Haaland. You feel for him. I really do, because I think this is a guy who should be playing in the Champions League, who should be playing and fighting for titles, and now he's currently having to debate whether
do we
he's
think
even going to stay on next
leave?
season.
I don't know why he'd stay. I can't see the motivation there. I know he wants the Premier League record.
He's not going to be allowed to.
That is the massive issue. But I think he'll push a lot harder than he did in that Man City summer, because I think if he'd really thrown his toys out the pram, like, he has given everything to that club. It's a similar situation with Declan Rice. You can't begrudge him a move now. Even at the weekend, scores one of the goals of the season and then watches his teammates just consistently let him down. And it must just be so frustrating.
It surprised me sometimes you don't see him get more frustrated on the pitch.
I know.
Like, and fair play to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Model pro.
It's very, very good. It speaks volumes about his character. But just after all that he's doing, constantly, game after game, week after week, getting his team back into it, like the Liverpool game, for instance, and then just constantly having to deal with what he's dealt with, it must be tough. It must be rough to sleep sometimes.
Yeah, I think just to bring it back to the relegation scrap. Yes. Whilst we're on the topic of like teams that are just in massive trouble, like, does any of us think that Leicester stand any hope tonight? I think they're gone tonight.
All I'm saying is every time we've done a Monday Vibes and spoken about something happening on
Newcastle
Monday,
away,
something's happened. Yeah, look, if by predictions and by how things have gone this season, Leicester will be losing tonight, which then makes their game on the weekend against West Ham even more tougher. And they kind of, if they're not in their hands if they lose tonight, if they can get a draw tonight or just something, just to help get the...
They lose, they're gone, aren't they?
Yeah.
Officially.
Yeah,
with their goal
officially,
difference.
yeah. But they just need they need something in some way, shape, or form, just for like motivation, also momentum to take them into that last game. I mean, right now you think of obviously Dean Smith and his backroom staff and what they were brought into. It kind of felt like it was a little too late, to be honest, when they made the change and brought him in.
Do we think that was the right decision now we look back on that, to let Rodgers go?
Yeah, it's easy to say in hindsight, isn't it? But I think there's a few clubs that, potentially did the wrong call.
I remember we sat here at times on Football Daily, and when we watched when Aston Villa sacked Steven Gerrard and brought in Unai Emery, like so many of the other clubs must have been thinking, oh God, like do we do it now? Do we do it now? They've just got Unai Emery, and then Wolves got Lopetegui, and then it's like, oh, these clubs are getting insane managers in.
Yeah.
When are we going to pull the plug? And it's like, if you felt like that was the perfect timing to do it.
Around the World Cup.
And difficult for a manager who'd been out of work for a little while to come into a squad that had been underperforming for quite a while now. And some of their big players like Wilfred Ndidi has had a shocking season. Like some of their fullbacks haven't had as good a season as previous years. Vardy is now just fully gone, I think, sadly.
Keeping goals been absolutely terrible.
They stuck with Danny Ward for way too long. Johnny Evans was injured for lots of the season. Like they've just had a shocking campaign. And even if I think the max points they can finish on is something like 36, that is terrible for a side that won an FA Cup a few years ago.
16 points off last season.
Consistently finished fifth in back-to-back seasons. Like they shouldn't be nearly as bad as they have been. And I think it stinks. It suggests that the dressing room is probably not where it should be in terms of the characters and effort right now.
And it's crazy that the facilities that they have, which are the best in the country, could be in the Championship next season. Like it's ridiculous everything they've got there. It's crazy. I've been lucky enough to see it.
The positive for
insane.
Leicester is that unlike some of the other clubs, Everton, you think of in particular, financially, like they are very stable. Like they have got the like we said, then the facilities are already in a good place.
They have less money though nowadays.
But they've got some sellable assets in that squad. You think James Maddison would probably leave. Don't think Harvey Barnes would potentially leave. You would think Yuri Tielemans is out of contract. But
the one thing you wonder, and I just don't know how it works sometimes with pro clubs, and if they just don't make these decisions, is when you are so Leicester last season when they were making these signings, they were making these signings with the idea of trying to be a middling, like finish 9th, 8th kind of position, maybe try and sneak into a European place. I do wonder with some of the signings that they made whether they've even got relegation clauses in their contracts, which could be awful.
Could be big.
Yeah, that could be a big problem. I just think that the decision to sack Rodgers now with hindsight, that had to be taken
earlier
at Christmas. That had to be taken World Cup period to give the club a shot at getting a levels manager in. Given that, like you said, Lopetegui came in, Unai Emery came in. I think Leicester could have easily attracted a name of that calibre. And then to end up with Dean Smith, I think
Dean Smith's a bad manager, but I just think
pretty disastrous tenure at Norwich.
Yeah, I think he just needed to be at the club longer as well. Like I think
Do we think Dean Smith? I'm not convinced that even with half a season, Dean Smith would have kept this club up.
Potentially not with the sort of mood around the side. I mean, Rodgers said last February, look, this squad needs massive overhaul. Some of the players aren't good enough and some of them aren't as good as they think. And he didn't really get that in the summer. I think there was an issue with their head of recruitment and him on gardening leave. And then they only signed...
They didn't have any money to spend.
Yeah, they signed Alex Smithies at the final few days. And then Fest came in really late. And they started the season just with really bad momentum. But actually picked up, was it just before the World Cup or just after they went on a nice little run? And it thought like, oh, right, Leicester are going to get into mid-table. And then just the same thing. Like,
the past 3 years, their recruitment... 6 years ago, their recruitment was really strong. The past 3 years, their recruitment's been really poor.
Really bad.
Really, really
Even
poor.
The summer before last, I think they signed Vestergaard, Bertrand, Boubacar Soumaré, who's never looked like the same player.
Chris Hamill sweet summer.
Yeah.
Boubacar Soumaré and Edouard. That's how you.
But even Daka, like I think we all believe that Daka was going to be somebody that would do really, really well in the Premier League, and it's just not worked out for him at all.
Yeah,
because they need that guy to replace Jamie Vardy, and like Iheanacho at times would be hot, then really cold sometimes. He's always a bit of a purple patch player, but Daka just didn't work out, and they needed someone to obviously put the ball in the back of the net, and they've not managed to find that.
Yeah, but there is some good players down there, isn't there? I did this on We Need to Talk. Like, I feel like there's a lot of assets at these clubs that
all
up. Like Leeds in particular.
There's like three. I think there's at least 3 players at every single club that goes down.
Absolutely, Leicester definitely. You think of Barnes, you think of Maddison. Tielemans is probably going to go. Kieran Dewsbury Hall is, I would say,
easily Premier League quality
in the Premier League.
Ciancho's already going to Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
I think there's
But I
bad
think
move,
like
but Uber.
Leeds, like I look at the Leeds squad, I think
Tyler
there's
Adams.
loads of good players in there.
Mhm.
I honestly do not
Weston
know
McKennie,
how they're in the
definitely in
position they're
midfield.
in. Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie,
Jack
Willian
Harrison.
Yonto,
I think
Brendan
Rodrigo's made a
Aronson, potentially.
made a
Rodrigo.
fantastic case about being a Premier League player.
Crescencio Somerville.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think there's some good, like not
Nonto.
amazing,
Nonto.
but yeah, Willie Nonto. Like there's some good
Even
players
Southampton.
there to go down.
Southampton, Livramento, James
Kotchap.
Ward-Prowse, Bella Kotchap,
Salisa.
Salise, Lavia.
Yeah.
There's plenty. I think all these clubs that have really exciting futures. And if there are relegation clauses in their contract, you might be able to get them for pretty cheap. Like if Leicester go down, James Maddison will be forcing a move out of that club, and surely the
Yeah.
fee drops.
Yeah.
Oh, it will definitely drop.
You just thought so.
Exactly.
That's why I
can't
was
make the
actually
same
so
thing.
keen for Sunderland to come up this year, because it felt like even though we just snuck into the playoffs, we had a massive opportunity to come up when the standard of the Championship isn't as good as it will be next year. Like I think these are three pretty good sides coming down at Championship level. Obviously they'll lose players. So it'll be a bit of a change, and there'll be a change of manager at Southampton. I think Russell Martin's about to get that job.
Yeah.
So there will be loads of change, but I feel like they've all got quite good chances of coming straight back up.
Yeah. Should we just talk about Forest quickly as well, because they
Yeah.
confirmed safety with that
A
win, didn't
job, honestly. And I think there has been. I saw Henry tweet this. I actually think that it's very true. Is we spoke about clubs sacking their managers. We also need to praise clubs that didn't sack their managers
Moyes.
and ended up
Marinakis, yeah.
doing really well. West Ham, there were so many moments they could have sacked David Moyes, and they stood by him.
they? Do you think he lasts the summer?
I don't. I think we'll see how the final goes. Obviously, that final and that European competition has really helped them with momentum and helping them then play in the Premier League. It feels like for a while there was not a lot of positivity going on at the club, and that the recent run in that competition has really changed things. It's really brought them on. I honestly couldn't call it. I think if they win it, there's a reason to go, well, you know what, David, like, thank you so much for what you've done. This is a brilliant moment to call it. We can maybe try and move forward from this. But also, well done, David. Thank you so much for winning it. Here's a new 1-year deal. Like, it wouldn't shock me either way. It really wouldn't.
Would you give him a new deal, Deuce?
Probably not. I think it's easy to get swept up with the last few weeks because it was so bad at the start of the year, and he's actually had a lot of backing as well. I mean, they signed serious players in the last summer. Lucas Paqueta's really come into his own in the last few weeks, but Scamacca hasn't really worked out. And there are quite a few good managers around Europe right now that have done underrated jobs. You look at someone like Edin Terzic at Dortmund. They're not going to get him, but for example, that is a sort of manager that you could get. Hypothetically at that sort of level, and it feels like David Moyes maybe run his course. I think overall he'll be remembered very fondly at West Ham, but I think it might be just time for a little change. And it does have the potential to go quite badly wrong though, because if you lose Declan Rice and David Moyes in one summer,
Maybe
it feels
even
like
Jarrod
quite a lot
Bowen
of
as well.
change.
Wouldn't shock me if someone goes in for him.
So big fence sit from me there.
But
Yeah,
sorry,
big-
you mentioned Forest as well.
Yeah, not enough Forest.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think Marinakis made the right decision keeping Steve Cooper. I think he's actually done a really, really good job, Steve Cooper,
With all those new
just
players.
because of the number of players that have come in. And I think I see people constantly saying, laughing about the amount of players. They had to sign, maybe not 33, but they had to sign a huge amount of players. All of their best players were loanees in the Championship. They were not in any way set for a Premier League push. You think about that squad when Steve Cooper took over, being a lower half, middling Championship side that he managed to take from relegation to promotion, way ahead of schedule. Pretty much the whole team needed an overhaul because they weren't good enough for the Premier League. You think of the players that they've kept as part of that system, Brennan Johnson,
Joe Worrell.
You think maybe Ryan Yates, but in general, that you needed 8 new starters before you even got to the backups and the squad players, so it needed a massive overhaul. I think Forest will be even better next year. I think they will have found players that have worked in this system. You think Felipe has been a great pickup.
Danilo.
They're going to try, I'm sure, to get Keylor Navas back for a second season. Danilo's been sensational. Morgan Gibbs-White is one of the best young players in the league. Mate,
he is ridiculous.
that 35, was it 35 million pounds? I think they ended up at. That looks like a perfectly reasonable fee. That was getting laughed at early doors. I think Awaniyi, whilst not being the most technical, has
Been
scored
good.
enough
Turned
goals.
up with
He's
big
also,
goals recently.
he's also
to
been
warrant
during the period he
being a
was
starter next year.
injured was where there was a real downturn for Forest too. I think when he's leading that front line, he makes them look so dangerous.
Yeah.
He's perfect for them, especially with the way he can link up or be that kind of bully in the box for Gibbs-White.
I think
Works
even players like
perfectly.
Serge Aurier, he's been good
Yeah, he
for
has been.
Forest.
There have been, I mean, it's not all been hits though. I think Remo Freuler's been really disappointing.
Yeah, it's probably been
Jesse Lingard's
12
been really
failures.
disappointing. They didn't use a player that they had on loan called Loic Bade. I think they had him from Rennes, and now he's at Sevilla, and is playing exceptionally well at Sevilla.
Emmanuel Dennis,
I mean, it hasn't just been hit, but fair enough. It's a unique strategy, and they've survived. So you've just got to take your hat off.
I'm really excited to see what their strategy is this summer, because I'm convinced they're going to have to. Well, first of all, they are going to have to offload a lot of players that haven't worked this season, but at least then they've found a core of players that can play Premier League football. They know a system rather than having to build a system on the fly as they go with a whole new 30 players. I think it's been a really impressive job. I think Steve Cooper will actually be okay next season, and they'll do all right. But to even keep that team in the league, given that they were a championship relegation threatened side 18 months ago or 24 months ago,
it's so
incredible.
Impressive. And just to touch upon as well, I know somebody who's a Forest fan, and he was saying 2 years ago the atmosphere and the way people viewed the club and everything was so negative, so bad. And he said that the atmosphere on Saturday when Arsenal were there was incredible, was so good, and just got the fans all believing and I mean, if they can have a strong summer, then I think they could easily stay in the Premier League.
Yeah, for sure. It comes through when you watch on TV. It's one of my favourite grounds to watch games at, even not in person, just through the TV. It comes through so well, and respect him, because all those different players coming in, they all want to start. They're, not necessarily all speaking English. They come from different cultures. A lot of them didn't have any Premier League experience. It could have been an absolute disaster in the dressing room. So to manage that so effectively, I think Steve Cooper, as you say, deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's move on then to talk about some European football, because you guys at home have been asking for this for a few weeks now, haven't you? And it was a massive weekend across Europe. It was huge. I mean, should we start with the Bundesliga, where it feels like Bayern have thrown it? Like Thomas Tuchel. What's gone on?
Well, I mean, the German football experts that I listen to, the likes of Rafa Honigstein, say that behind the scenes in the final days of Nagelsmann, things were really not good behind the scenes. And actually, they really respect Tuchel's work there. And he's doing everything he can, on the training ground, etc. And they think they'll be a lot better next year. But the results not been great, particularly in the Champions League against Man City, and then at the weekend against Leipzig. I mean, I didn't watch the full game, but just catching the highlights, like some sloppy errors at the back. They were 1-0 up in that game to lose that 3-1 against a side that have only beaten them once in 16 attempts in their entire history is really pretty damning. So they looked like a couple of weeks ago that they've got it all together and we're going to just win these final two games and win the title, but now it's in Dortmund's hands. Although it would be classic Dortmund to throw it away. But I just don't think it's going to happen.
Dortmund against Mainz, aren't they?
I have to say that, I've also spoken to a few Bayern Munich fans, and they were kind of the consensus that it should have been done earlier. It should have been done even earlier to sack Nagelsmann. Like, they actually left it too late, and that's part of the reason that it's all gone so wrong at the end of the season. He was top of the league, and let's not forget, he was also in the Champions League, and he was also in the Pokal, and they are now out of the Champions League, and it was a crushing defeat against Man City. Not to say that Nagelsmann would have won that game, because I think Man City are the far better side, but the Pokal defeat was not good against Freiburg at all. The football's been extremely clunky, hasn't it, since he's come in, because it is a very different system and way of playing than Julian Nagelsmann. But I agree, behind the scenes, you look at the interview with Thomas Müller, man. That interview with Thomas Müller is extremely telling that Nagelsmann could not remain. It was basically untenable because of his character and the way he was interacting with the squad. The squad didn't want him there, and if the players actively do not want the coach there, then it doesn't matter how good a job he's done and level he can go to. If he can't get on with the players, then a change has to be made.
Yeah, and the change they made, realistically, give him a pre-season, get him maybe a couple of players, get rid of a couple of players.
It'll be fine, but this is a bad job so far.
It has been a bad job so far, definitely. And obviously the way he ended his time at Chelsea as well this season was a bad time too. So things aren't necessarily looking too good. But for Dortmund, for Marco Reus in particular, who hasn't won the Bundesliga, joined the year after they won the Bundesliga, you just got your fingers crossed for him. You really do. And that side, and obviously you mentioned the manager earlier about West Ham would be an unreal move if he got that, or if they got him. But also the stories, Spalletti. A guy who they brought in to be the replacement of Erling Haaland, looked really good. Then unfortunately got diagnosed with cancer, beat cancer, came back in the same season, and is then helping them to the title charge. It's crazy. Yeah,
it is ridiculous. I mean, some of the signings have flown under the radar a little bit, haven't they? You think of the exits they've had in recent years, the likes of Jadon Sancho, Erling Haaland. They're going to have this summer with Jude Bellingham looking like he's going to go to Real Madrid. Yeah, Dahoud is also off. But players like Adeyemi, who've just come in under the radar, not big fees, classic Dortmund style, playing really well. Like, you have to respect again Dortmund's recruitment and ability to at least stay in this title battle with Bayern, because I think quite a lot of clubs across Europe would have just fallen away.
Yeah.
Because Bayern are just a behemoth, aren't they? And it would be a story of the season if Dortmund won it, wouldn't it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you look at their points tally compared to previous years, it's not even like as good as in previous years. But as you say, having gone on that amazing run, I think they went 13 straight wins after the World Cup.
Yeah.
Then had that dip, had a really bad game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. That felt like a big opportunity as well. Not saying they would have beaten Real Madrid in the next round, but to go just a bit deeper in the Champions League than they have in recent years. But yeah, you're so right. Adeyemi's been brilliant in recent weeks. Daniel Marlon, after a difficult first season at Dortmund, has been sensational this year. Nicolas Sula's really helped in the back. Schlotterbeck as well had a bit of an impact, probably not as much as I would have expected. But yeah, and now Gregor Kobel as well is being talked about as a really top up-and-coming goalkeeper as well. It's really, really impressive. And to lose, it's so rare for a side to lose their best player or one of their best players in their sort of fulcrum and actually get better. We saw it with Villa and Grealish. Like, it's very difficult to keep momentum going. We've seen it with Leicester City in recent years, losing their best players. Dortmund do it better than anyone else. And it feels like not only Jude Bellingham might leave, Rafael Guerreiro's out of contract as well. He's been great in recent weeks playing in midfield. So, yes, there's going to be a lot more change at Dortmund. Just of all sides, you just back them to continue to sort it out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we should talk about Italy as well. Obviously, Napoli already champions, but Spalletti...
Our Sunday Vibe shout.
Yeah, our Sunday Vibe shout. If anybody watched Sunday Vibes, and I hope you're going to watch Sunday Vibes, if you haven't already, please do, because we're talking about how to fix PSG, where we suggested Spalletti should take over as PSG manager in a cultural revamp of the club. It seems like the...
Spalletti watched and has taken
Spalletti
inspiration.
watched, and he's decided this could be an option for him because, you know, very punchy statements from Fabrizio about it being a concrete possibility of him leaving the club. And I have to say, his statements after the game... even punchier. The decision's been made.
He was about to sign a new deal last week.
Going to communicate it. I know, and it feels now like it's one last hurrah, and it's done and dusted. A Scudetto in Naples and dipped.
Not the first time this happened, though. You look at when Conte won the Scudetto with Inter Milan, then moved on. Could happen here again. Spurs could possibly be the place which could be looking at him.
They're going to go Arne Slot, aren't they?
Got to aim high. I think maybe he's just heard, you know, I don't know, maybe he's talked to Osimhen's agent and found out that deal is closer to being completed or wherever he's going. Maybe he just feels like it can't really get any better. Because
also like wages, right? If you've just won the league, surely you want a little bump.
Well, exactly. And maybe he doesn't see that the budget's there for this summer because they didn't actually spend that much money last year, given the sort of calibre of player that they lost as well. He's done a remarkable job. They've dipped in recent weeks. It feels like they've almost been drunk. But they got over the line against Inter Milan at the weekend, a 3-1 win. And amazing work from him. And if he does go to PSG, it'll be a great moment for Sunday Vibes.
And then finally, I think we should just touch upon La Liga, where yet another dark day in the history of Spanish football, with Vinicius being racially abused at the Mestalla. And before the game as well, even before he got off the bus, you know, thousands of fans racially abusing him. Then it felt like the entire stadium racially abusing him. Just an incredibly dark day again for La Liga. And the reaction after from Javier Tebas.
Shocking.
It's shameful. It's absolutely shameful.
It's terrible.
He basically insinuated that Vinicius had missed a few meetings about racism, so that somehow justified the treatment that he gets. And this is a 22-year-old who's only really been in European football for, 3-4 years? And he's going through this at that age. I mean, he literally against Atletico Madrid earlier this season, they hung an effigy of him off a bridge. Can you imagine seeing that as a 22-year-old? It's horrendous. And fair play to Carlo Ancelotti. I thought his statements afterwards were excellent. But Real Madrid need to support him better, and La Liga need to get their act together because it is blighting the entire league.
Well, even the referee said that apparently he followed the protocol of the league when race abuse happens. And that protocol, obviously, is not of standard. It's not enough. Carlo Ancelotti supposedly said he wanted to walk off the pitch, but wasn't allowed to. He wanted the players to walk off the pitch. He said that even if we were winning 3-0, I would have wanted the exact same thing. It is really, really poor. I think it's so poor at the moment, and it feels like we're speaking about it every single week
Especially
now.
when it comes to Vinicius.
But it's always Vinicius, and when it's away games that Real Madrid are playing, there's always targeted abuse at Vinicius Jr. from the fans. You can't. It's unacceptable in today's society, and unacceptable was always unacceptable. You think about this league, right? That had incredible players playing in there. Ronaldinho, right? You've had the likes of Ronaldo.
Eto'o.
I mean, even Rivaldo. These guys who have made La Liga what it is today. and yet it is this accepted culture out there that this is allowed. And things have to be done because even Vinicius out in his statement, there's literally a video, bless him, where he's getting upset on the pitch because of these chants. And I think at the end of the day, football is 20 people running around after a ball. Like, it's
you have to say as well, Vinicius is handling it so well. Like,
incredibly well.
On social media, I think he's battling his corner on the pitch. Like, Vinicius is doing everything right. The amount of sort of excuses being made for these racists in Spain is crazy. Yeah. Honestly, there is nothing that Vinicius has done wrong. So that narrative needs to end quickly, because I'm seeing like lots of people on Twitter and social media with this rubbish narrative about provoking people. What a load of rubbish that is. There's no excuse for it, and quite frankly, La Liga need to get their act together.
Honestly,
because it's turning into a farce.
Stadium bans,
and it's already a farce.
They need to be making things happen.
Forget
here.
Stadium bans. They need to start deducting points.
100%, banning fans from coming to if they from video, like literally going to spend hours watching the videos. Find the fans, ban them.
They need to start deducting points. Yeah. That's the only way this is going to stop. Because stadium bans clearly don't work. We've seen that be an ineffective method throughout Europe, time and time again, when it comes to international and European football. The only way it's going to stop is if that happens, we go, okay, we're going to deduct 5 points from your team. Fans would quickly realise we cannot do this because we are hurting our own team, whilst also banning the people that are involved.
Ban the people. Like, they're not like, football is for every, like, literally it sounds so like a general thing, but it is for everybody, right? And if you're coming to watch these games and making it about the colour of somebody's skin, you can't be involved. You're not allowed to be involved.
And what they want is for it to start affecting his performance and him just to quietly accept it. And it's not affecting his performance at all. I mean, if Real Madrid had gone deeper in the Champions League, he'd probably be in for a shout for the Ballon d'Or. And he's not going quietly about it. He's dealing with it, as Joe says, absolutely perfectly. And you watch, Valencia put out a statement afterwards and talked about incidents. It's not incidents, it's racism. Say it what it is, and don't hide behind, it's just a match incident, or he shouldn't react like that. He's antagonising people. That's a load of rubbish. It's total rubbish. He's within his rights to be as angry as he wants about being racially abused as a 22-year-old forward on a pitch. It's completely isolating, and I feel so sorry for him. But fair play to him for the way he's handled it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on then to do our customary team of the week then.
Yes.
Bringing it back to the Premier League
here.
Some unbelievable performances this week.
It's good.
I'm tempted. I want to stick David Raya in goal. I think for the first half against Tottenham, he was magnificent. Yeah. Some unbelievable saves.
It takes a worldie from Kane to score.
Yeah, and his distribution is still exceptional. Exactly. The goal he concedes is a worldie. I want David Raya in goal.
Yeah. I think it's fair enough. I mean, Spurs were playing pretty well at that stage. I think it was the best game I've seen Dejan Kulusevski, or best half I've seen him play for quite a while. His link up with Son was really good. And Raya was on a one-man mission, and then they just dominated second half.
Also want to shout out David De Gea, though. Clean sheet, golden glove.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's not been amazing this season, but very good performance yet again.
Fair enough.
Credit where credit's due.
Defence.
Yes, Yerry Mina.
Gotta be in there.
Obviously scoring the 98th minute winner, or draw a leveler even, I should say. Yeah, I think it's more for kind of getting the ball in the back of the net rather than anything else, to be honest.
I'm not a massive fan of Yerry Mina. I think he is a massive antagoniser. He makes a meal out of a lot of incidents, but for turning up in that moment, it will be remembered for a long time if they stay up.
Yeah. Another couple, Joe Worrell, I think, man of the match display against Arsenal, although slightly fortunate to get that over Morgan Gibbs-White, I thought, but he was magnificent. And I also want to shout out Victor Lindelof.
He's been great in the last month or so.
I know. He's been really, really good. He's proven
there were rumours about him leaving.
No, he cannot leave. I cannot afford to let Victor Lindelof go this summer. I think it's much more likely Harry Maguire leaves the club. And Victor Lindelof, in the absence of Lisandro Martinez, Varane has obviously come back in the last couple of weeks, but when it was Shaw and Lindelof, he was great. I think Lindelof needs a shout. Another clean sheet, because United don't score goals; they just keep clean sheets.
Worthy inclusion.
Not terrible. You can improve from that.
Should we have Casemiro in there as well then?
Lovely.
The goal is
finish,
lovely. Yeah.
A little kind of not bicycle kick, but kind of it's like the old age bicycle kick, isn't it? Like
he's scored some big goals.
He's been one of your player of the season at times. There's an argument for. If he wasn't for the red cards and stuff like that, then I think the argument was stronger. Bruno's probably the one.
He's an underrated goal scorer as well. His Real Madrid record, he consistently got about 5 to 7 goals every single season.
And you're right, big goals. I specifically remember the header against us at the bridge to make it 1-1.
Carabao Cup final.
What about some of the West Ham boys. Paqueta feels like he's got to be in there
Has
recently.
to be in. I mean, yeah, not just for the assist for that Lanzini goal late on, but actually throughout the entire game, the confidence he was playing with, the way he's a big guy and he holds off players so effectively. And after a kind of disappointing first 6 months, I think he's been really, really good recently. So I'm really pleased that he's starting to, prove to everyone why they brought him in.
The Declan Rice farewell.
Yeah, I mean, what a goal to score at the moment too. I mean, he's
joining Arsenal.
yeah, it looks like it. I mean, he deserves to be in Team of the Week. I think Gibbs White as well. We mentioned him too.
Good shout.
Just past couple of weeks, Gibbs White has put some mega performances.
There was a moment against Arsenal where he dribbled past 4 or 5 players and then got a shot off. It's parried wide.
Yeah.
And then the keeper threw out to the fullback. He sprinted after, clattered into
he
him.
Just cared.
Got up and G'ing out the fans. I was like, oh my god, this guy.
He lives for it, man. He lives for it.
Yeah,
and I think he's somebody that we're going to be obviously talking about a lot over the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Forward lines then. Do we want, I guess, Mbermo?
Yeah, we mentioned him.
Away at
Did really
Spurs.
well.
Really nice finishes.
Really well. Smart
Ferguson?
finishes. Of course.
Although
Get Evan in there.
Bazunu. Was it Bazunu?
Get Evan
in there.
No, McCarthy, sorry. Southampton
Get
keepers
Evan
this
in
year
there.
as well.
Ferguson. What a season for him. 17 when the Premier League started this season.
Yeah, and then Mitro maybe?
Yeah, I mean, Mitro popped up with two big goals, didn't he? And yeah, it was
Also had
quite
a big
funny
zit
afterwards.
as well.
He did,
Spot,
yeah.
I should say, yeah.
Well, not during the game, but I've
Not
seen
during
the
the game,
interview,
yeah. Nothing wrong with
Maybe
it. Just-
Alvarez? Nah.
Do we have space?
Alvarez was
How many
good.
players have we
Well,
made?
it'd be either Mitro or Alvarez. Alvarez can be the bench option.
Yeah, this is where he lives, isn't it? So let's put Alvarez on the bench. I think Mitro to start. Pretty solid team of the week there.
One thing we should have said, actually, if you wanted more information about Vinicius Jr. and what's been going on with him this season, go check out Why You're Wrong. Pat did a special episode on that a few weeks ago, and go check out all the other Why You're Wrongs. It's a brilliant strand every Wednesday on Football Daily.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's it for another week of Monday Vibes. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.